Hi everyone, good morning. Steve Crosby here. Welcome to this edition of Monday Morning Musing, where we are continuing on in just the introduction to an idea that I'm calling the Reformation, the half-truths, myths, and lies that you have been told. In this episode, I want to talk to you about the difference between history and memory. Right now, in the next few minutes, we are going to experience something together in a historical, factual way. But what we take away from the next few minutes is probably going to be as diverse as the people who are listening and currently engaged. And as you retell this to somebody else, the facts will be filtered through your personality, your experience, the baggage you brought to this conversation, the baggage you brought to this video, and my recollection is not the same as the facts. Memory is influenced by many different things. And I'd like to give you an example from the Civil War so that, this is not quite as, directed towards bad Protestant thinking. If you took a high school or a college test and you asked someone, what was the turning point of the Civil War? 9.5 times, 10 out of 10 times, you're going to get Gettysburg was the turning of the Civil War. It was all over after Lee lost at Gettysburg, the war was virtually done. That is the answer on the test. That is the answer that you're going to get marked correct. And that is totally not true. But it is the memory that we have told ourselves for over 150 years. And that memory has been reinforced by movies that you've seen, stories that you've read, and memory has become entrenched as fact. If Gettysburg was the end of the war, why was Lincoln afraid that he wouldn't get reelected in 1864? If you read Lincoln's letters, it's going so poorly for the Union that he is afraid he's not going to win in 1864. That's not what somebody writes who thinks the war was over a year ago. And if you read the records, the newspapers, and the diaries of people in the Confederacy after Gettysburg, how much of an effect would you think Lee's loss at Gettysburg had on the collective consciousness of the Confederate public? None at all. Lee's reputation was not diminished an iota by the loss at Gettysburg. As a matter of fact, if you read the diaries of the people who were actually there at the time, as in living during the time, as long as we have Lee, we can win. The other thing you need to remember is that victory for the Confederacy was a much lower bar than for the Union. The story goes like this. Well, it was a lost cause, the South, the manpower and material. There's just no way they could compete with the North. It was all over by Gettysburg. No. All they had to do was wear out the North. Listen, if you read the newspapers up until 1864, Lincoln is under brutal attack in the media. When is this war going to end? You see, the Union's job was more difficult. They had to conquer the Confederacy. The Confederacy just had to wear out the North. Otherwise, we have had enough. And that's happened two other times in history. It was more likely the Confederates would win than it was for George Washington to defeat Great Britain. There were longer odds for that than for the Confederacy to lose. The Vietnam War, for those of you who are old enough to remember it. How was a world superpower with unlimited resources defeated? It was defeated because in a democratic republic, when the public decides we are done, no more money, no more of our sons' bloods in those days, we are unwilling to sustain this cost. See, the South did not have to conquer Washington, D.C. They just had to wear out the Union. But what happened in 1864, after Grant came into the story, Grant would actually fight. And Grant understood that as long as Lee was functioning, the Confederacy had a chance. And really, the Civil War did not pivot to inevitability until approximately when Atlanta fell. Sherman in the South, Grant in the East, Grant chasing Lee. That's when the Civil War turned. But our memory and the facts don't coincide. And our memory is influenced, as I said, by media, by art, by picture, by stories. Well, guess what, guys? When it comes to church history, it is exactly the same thing. The narrative that you have been taught about Luther, like the picture, you see him going up to the Wittenberg door, and nailing his 95 Theses on the church door in Wittenberg, and it's the only piece of paper there. That's art. The church door was the public bulletin board for the society. It was no big deal. We'll talk about that more when we talk about Luther in specifics. That door would have been covered with other announcements and whatever. Well, you say, well, that's an insignificant tidbit. Yeah, but it's the point is, how does art influence what we think of history? So memory is the story that we tell ourselves about what we have experienced factually. And they are not necessarily the same. And when it comes to Protestant Catholic stuff, Reformation stuff, we are dealing with this is the kind way of saying it, because I'm going to get to the unkind way. We are dealing with a lot of entrenched memory, stories that have been told with an iota of truth, but which in themselves really are not true at all. I'll see you next time.